And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavone, joined alongside as always by my co-host Andrew Johnson. And Johnson, it is finally that time of the year. Today, as of March 16th, it is Selection Sunday. The bracket was just announced about a few minutes ago and fully is announced. We now know the field of 68 for this year's NCAA tournament. And now it's time to finally start making some picks for this year's NCAA March Madness.
Yeah, I'm very excited. More excited because I can watch my team this year. And
Thank God.
yeah, I was really sweating it out this year. I was really nervous.
It was a rough show for us having to break down the bracket while watching our team get screwed by the committee.
And you know what I'm thinking of too, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit selfish, but I'm going to go into immediately and to spoil it. North Carolina getting in for lack of quality wins, and when that was cited, that's why Seton Hall and St. John did not get in last year. It's just a mockery of the whole selection process.
And they even broke down like how, if UAB won today, then North Carolina would have been out. I think the other thing also last year, there's so many bid stealers. I think that was also an issue. But for
St. John's
wasn't,
and again, I hate to beat it
right?
We weren't even first four or second four, so like it was ridiculous.
Or second four, yeah. But we got our retribution this year, and thankfully for us, you and I made sure to not pick them in the Big East Championship when we made our picks last week about it, and it worked out for us. In the end of the day, St. John's wins the Big East, so that was a nice game to be at for the two of us there last night in Madison Square Garden. But enough about us with St. John's. Johnson, let's break down this NCAA tournament. As you mentioned, there has been some already interesting selections. Obviously, North Carolina, you mentioned being one of them. You can make the case for pretty much the entirety of the first four matches with those 11 seeds. We saw North Carolina get in. We saw Texas get in. We saw Xavier get in. And we saw San Diego State get in. Those are the final four teams that made the tournament this year. And teams like West Virginia, Indiana, for example, they just missed out in this year's NCAA tournament. So a rough break for those two teams. And what it looked like going into this week, that they were probably locks to make the tournament, but West Virginia had that bad loss to Colorado in the first round of the Big 12, and then Indiana really just had a very up and down season, so they were pretty much teetering towards maybe being in, maybe being out, and that was pretty much the same thing for the other teams that actually did make it. Teams like Xavier, who lost in their first round matchup in the Big East tournament. Texas had some very impressive wins in the SEC tournament, but they did end up losing to Tennessee in their next matchup. We saw San Diego State lose to Boise State, who went on to the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State also being one of those teams that missed out on the bracket. And then you even see I already forgot who the last team I said was that made the first four. Now that I'm talking through it, but regardless, those teams do make it into the tournament. And obviously, you've already voiced your opinion on North Carolina being in. But what about the other three teams? Do you think the committee got it right with those three?
I don't think so. I don't think San Diego State should have been in there. Let's again. I can't believe the Mountain West got four in. It's kind of ridiculous. I'm getting really sick of this conference. Listen, I love a good mid-major, but the metrics on San Diego State they were not good. Like their best win of the season is they beat Houston early on in the year on neutral. But again, you cannot count November basketball for March.
I forgot that I was trying to think of what team I missed out when I was initially making my statement. It was UNC. UNC had that weird loss to Duke in the ACC tournament where they lost on a lane violation at the end.
That should have kicked them out, in my opinion. You're not playing serious basketball.
I thought for sure that was going to end their season right there. But
and I guess this is what I will say is, though, UNC had a perfect quad 2 record, though. They had one major blemish, I guess, against Stanford at home, which was a buzzer beater, 72-71. But I 1-12 in quad 1 play, I would take a team like Indiana. That would have been the team I think that should have gotten it over UNC. Out of all these teams, I would have put Indiana in. And I think it's only because that Mike Woodson is going to retire now. Like that's going to be it. Or he's gonna step down at the end of the year.
Just leave and try to think about going for a different job. But yeah,
because he had the best win away from home out of all the other teams on the bubble. winning at Michigan State is a huge win. That is a statement win. They also beat former national champions Purdue at home. And they had a couple other decent wins. Not really, like they were 4-13 quad one wins. They really only lost quad one games. And it's not like they lost like the BS quad one wins where it's like a 75. Like I guess you could argue that their worst loss of the year was at Nebraska or maybe at Iowa where they got blown out. And that's probably what kept them out of the tournament. But what team would you pick, Nick? Out of all these teams in the bubble that didn't get in?
It's tough because the committee talked about West Virginia, and they said that one of the other reasons that they didn't make it was because
Quad
one
two
of their
losses.
players, it wasn't that too, but one of their players got injured towards the end of the season. I forget his name off the top of my head,
It's Tucker.
but I think it was Jeffries. They said his name was. I don't really remember. I also haven't really been paying attention to West Virginia all season. Let me look it up real quick. The reason that basically they said it was kind of like how we saw with college football last season, where Florida State didn't make the Final Four because a certain player got injured, and they took that into a factor. So it was like that was a reason. The quad two stuff was a reason. Obviously, losing the game to Colorado was definitely another reason too. Like you can't lose to a team that won three conference games the entirety of the season in your conference tournament, nonetheless. When you were expected, all you had to do was just win, and they were into the second round and into the NCAA tournament.
They should have went 7 on
Uh,
quad, and
yeah,
they
right.
had to go Tucker
Tucker
DeVry.
Devries.
Yeah.
Is it DeVry or Devries?
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, no, that I don't. I'm trying to think. If I had to pick one that missed it, that I'm surprised didn't make it, I probably go around the lines of where you said with Indiana. I think they had so many like metrics going for them compared to teams like UNC, and you know they got really good towards the end of the season. But as you and I both know, they've kind of even pointed that emphasis where the last 2 weeks of your regular season doesn't play as big of a factor as your earlier season metrics because they want the beginning of your season to mean something instead of you putting in your best efforts the last 2 weeks of the year. That's kind of what this tournament has been these last couple of seasons in terms of the committee making their picks.
Yeah, and I am excited because a team like Xavier did get in the tournament, and I
Yeah,
really thought that close loss was going to eliminate them. Like it was, they blew a huge lead
it's kind of retribution
in the
for the Big East
quarterfinals.
for what happened, as you mentioned last season.
That's what I
It's kind of
mentioned. Yeah,
retribution,
no, and their metrics were good. 45 in the
right?
net, they should be the last team in. 45 is kind of
Right.
like the hard cutoff. And they took care of games in quad two too. Like they went 8-2 quad two games. And again, not all quad two games are equal. Those include wins over UConn, wins over Creighton. So they have wins against the field. They also won at Marquette. So that is 3 wins against the field right there.
Yeah. No, I think like you said, it's going to be a very interesting tournament. I think a lot of people have described it maybe as top heavy, if you want to call it that. I think you can make a case for a lot of these teams winning the national championship come this next couple of weeks. Because I mean, to think that this is why the tournament's so great because we get this bracket done today, and now 22 days from tonight, we will have a national champion. So it's going to be a wild time these next 3 weeks determining who's going to be battling it out in the national championship game, what upsets we might have along the way. We've seen so many thrilling games these last couple of seasons, and I'm certain we're in for a lot more this upcoming season. I think this March Madness might be one of the more might be more of the overhyped brackets that we probably will have in a very long time. So I
So
think we'll get some very good
I do
games.
want to talk about seeding a little bit. I know we have a couple of things we want to get into, but let's talk about seeding here. I am shocked teams like Georgia and Baylor got 9 seeds. I am shocked that
Vanderbilt getting a 10, Georgia getting a 9 was very shocking to me. I was very stunned
Oklahoma
by
getting
that.
a 9 seed is an absolute tragedy, by the way.
Yeah.
That is a huge miscarriage of justice right there. Oklahoma should have been absolutely nowhere near the 9 line. You have teams like New Mexico, which fantastic. Listen. I know that they didn't win their tournament, and they got knocked out in I think the semifinals. But a team like Oklahoma that won 6 games in conference all year gets a 9 seed. Like that. Hey, listen, 13-0 non-conference. I get it, but 6 wins in your conference should not warrant a 9 seed. That should warrant a trip to Dayton, if anything.
Right. Yeah, I, I don't know. It's some of the seeding was definitely weird. You know, Vanderbilt was a team that was on the bubble going into this weekend, even going into today, and then they got a 10 seed. I'm trying to think of another team that was in the same situation like that. There was Oklahoma. You said was a 9 seed. Georgia, I think, got in. You know, in
Georgia,
terms of
as
like they
Georgia
were
was
on the
more
bubble
like,
towards the end,
yeah, Georgia was
right?
really played their way into it. I thought they were 10 or 11, then they played their way into it. So them as a 9
Yeah,
seed is less egregious. Now,
I think. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
a team like Louisville, I think, got majorly screwed. I thought Louisville would be playing for a seeding, maybe for a 6 or a 5. Maybe they'd be the last 5 seed or one of the first 6 seeds. But for them to be an 8 seed, that's an absolute miscarriage too. That's a miscarriage of
Right.
justice.
And they got possibly one of the worst, 8-9 matchups they probably could have gotten in this entirety of the first round because, some of these 8 seeds, they're getting, there's nothing against these teams like Oklahoma and Georgia. Those were teams that
Yeah,
were
they got
up and
Creighton.
down, but they were in, right. They were in that top heavy SEC conference. Baylor in for Mississippi State. And then, Creighton, who just played in the Big East title game, they get in the first round. Louisville was just playing for their conference game as well.
Yeah,
Those two teams were
makes
just battling out for a
makes
championship.
absolute zero sense. I mean, Creighton more as a 9 seed makes more sense. I would have had them as an 8, but
Yeah.
to give Clemson a much higher seed than Louisville, I can't agree with that.
Well, I think, Jonathan, the best thing we can do is let's go by each region and we'll give our picks for what our most likely upset will be in that region. Um, what who we think will win that region overall, go to the Final Four, and probably I think maybe also what the biggest game to look out for, at least in the first round. What game you're looking forward to the most. So let's start off with the South region, that being where Auburn, the number one overall seed in that region. You mentioned Louisville faced Creighton in the first round. You have Michigan, the Big Ten champions, facing UC San Diego. Texas A&M facing Yale. Ole Miss getting the winner of San Diego State and UNC. Iowa State facing Lipscomb. Marquette facing New Mexico. And then finally rounding it out with Michigan State taking on Bryant in that South region. If you want, you could go in order of picking game that you're looking forward to, your upset in that region, and your region winner. If you want to go in that route.
Yeah. So my upsets could be New Mexico over Marquette. Surprise, surprise. New Mexico is underseeded here, and Marquette is maybe a little underseeded here. I think it's appropriate, but them in the 7-10 matchup, I think they're going to match up well. I'm pretty sure Rick Pitino and Richard are already talking about the intel they have on Marquette, so that's going to be interesting. Maybe he'll share it, maybe he won't, but that's going to be my upset pick. In round 1. I guess it's not really like, oh, it's like not a 15 over a 2 or, a 13 over a 4, but it's still an upset nevertheless. For my South region winner, I guess I have to pick Auburn by default, even though they've lost 3 out of their last 4 games and have 1 win in March.
It's pretty much set up for them or Michigan State, in my opinion, to get to the Final Four.
Yeah. I mean, Michigan State scares me a little bit more because of their pace of play, but I'll blindly pick Auburn, even though they probably won't get there.
And what first round match are you looking forward to? I'm assuming Louisville Creighton.
Louisville Creighton. I think that's gonna be the best one here. Yale, Texas A&M could be a little bit sneaky too, or UC San Diego, Michigan. I think if you want to see a 12-13 matchup, those are the best possible 12-13 matchup. I think all those teams are excellent. Nothing against a team like Liberty or Akron. Akron's obviously very good. I don't want to play Akron in the tournament. But from the potential 12-13 matchups, I think that's the most likely one to occur, only because Ivy League teams tend to play pretty smart, and UC San Diego they're no slouches. They won 30 games in their conference, so I would also pencil that in for maybe a couple potential upsets over there, but I wouldn't bet on that.
Yeah, I think this side. I think again, like some of these 12 seeds have a lot of upset potential, and that's kind of where I'm going with my upset for this first round. For this, at least this region, if there is going to be an upset in this region, I think it could be UC San Diego taking down Michigan in that spot. I think the only, and I don't know if I'm going to make that pick when I make my official bracket. I'm probably going to make a lot of brackets regardless, but the first bracket I will make, I don't know if I will put that down as my pick. I think for me, looking at it, you could make the obvious and say, oh, you know what? Whoever wins San Diego State and UNC probably gets past Ole Miss. I don't necessarily know that because, again, those two teams, a lot of people are making the case that they probably shouldn't even be here to begin with. So I could just see Ole Miss getting that job done because everyone's thinking that, oh, they're probably the weakest sixth seed to be facing right now. So those two teams have a great opportunity. I don't necessarily believe that. So I think Ole Miss could get the job done against those two teams. I'm looking at the rest of the region. Obviously Yale has pulled off some incredible upsets years past. A&M's had a very weird season, especially towards the end of the year. I think they get the job done come tournament time. Michigan is the only one that scares me because they went into the Big Ten tournament on a 3-game losing streak, and they were looking pretty bad. They looked great during this entire Big Ten tournament, got past, their last 2 games especially, close encounters with both Wisconsin and with Maryland, including that last second shot against Maryland beating them with 0.1 second. So, Michigan is riding hot going into the tournament, which is always nice to have going into tournament time. But as you mentioned, they're facing a 30-win team that's also coming off a conference championship. It's probably the 112 seed, one of those 12 seeds that you don't want to face. Them and, a team like McNeese, who we'll talk about probably in a little bit. I think for me in that region, if I had to pick an upset, I'd probably go with UC San Diego over the Michigan Wolverines. Game to look forward to in that region. I'll stick with that game. I think that's probably the game for me to look out for in that one because I think it has not only upset potential, but it could be a very high scoring affair between those two teams. I could see a very high scoring matchup with the two. I will probably also go with Auburn to win the region. I think the only other team outside of them to win it's probably Michigan State, but I'm with you where they could lose in the second round to a team like Marquette or New Mexico. They could lose to an Iowa State or an Ole Miss if it's them in the Sweet 16. This is pretty much set up for Auburn to get to the Final Four, in my opinion, when this bracket initially came out.
Yeah, and Evan Mew. So I love analytics. Bartorvik is great. Ken Palm's great, obviously. Evan Miwa of evanmiwa.com released his official, I guess, probabilities for the last for this tournament. It came about 15, 20 minutes ago, and you could actually sim them. So again, I think that's behind a paywall, but he released just their probabilities of getting to each round based on his analytics. And again, they're simulated 10,000 times based off the team ratings and accounting for current injuries. So he has Duke 25% chance to win the national championship right now. I guess assuming that Cooper Flag is going to be healthy.
Yeah.
So Duke, Houston,
They
Florida, Auburn,
so.
Tennessee, Alabama, St. John's in that order for national champions. That's 1 through 7. Then 8, 9, 10 is actually Michigan State, Gonzaga, Texas Tech. So Gonzaga having the 8th largest odds are kind of crazy.
Hey, you never know when it comes tournament time. Some teams get hot. I mean, it's I guess never say never when it comes down to it. Let's go to the East region next, Johnson. I think that's probably the next one we can go to. That being with Duke being the one, they'll face American or Mount St. Mary's in their first round. The 8-9 matchup in Mississippi State versus Baylor. The 5-12 Oregon versus Liberty. The 4-13, a very interesting matchup between Arizona and Akron. The 6-11 is between BYU and VCU. The 3-14 Wisconsin versus Montana. The 7-10 St. Mary's and Vanderbilt, and then rounds it out with the 2-15 matchup of Alabama and Robert Morris. So same thing, Johnson. Upset, game to watch for, and your region winner.
The upset I'm looking at is Akron over Arizona. Again, I don't know the line on this, but Arizona for a 4 seed, I would say, is one of the weaker 4 seeds in my opinion. And Akron is
Arizona is a I didn't mean to cut you off. They're a 14.5 point favorite right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Akron has guts. They came back from, I think, down 16 in their conference.
They were down 15 at halftime.
15 at the half. I thought it was 16. Thank you for correcting me.
It might have been 16. It was at least 15 or 16 at the half.
Listen, I know they have a bunch of crazy wins. But again, is every quad one win really equal? Probably not. They've lost big games before. They've lost against a team like, let's say, Kansas State.
They lost to Princeton. Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about, of course, in the past. They've lost to Princeton, they've lost to Buffalo.
You're just talking about it generally.
In general, this year, if they could drop a game like to Kansas State, or maybe they play Arizona State really close, a team like Akron that can get really hot and shoot the basketball,
Yep.
it's possible. That'd be my upset pick out of all these ones. Again, I could be safe and go, oh yeah, Vanderbilt over St. Mary's for every single one. That's boring. You have to pick a couple of them. VCU plays really well. I would look at that as my second one. VCU over BYU. I don't know what the spread on that is. I haven't looked at any spreads yet besides the St. John's one because I had to look at that one. For the game I'm looking forward to the most, give me Oregon Liberty here. The Flames, interesting team here. Conference USA winners. They've won a bunch of games, and so Oregon just kind of feels weird to me. Like I don't really think they're such a dominant team where like, oh, yep, like they're a shoe in to move on here. And I guess 5-12 historically has the most upsets. Liberty
Right.
really wasn't tested though. Like again, I think the best win of the year is over McNeese State, which I think is one of the best coach mid-major teams in the country. They played Alabama really close to the beginning of the season, but I'm really going off the deep end here. Uh, Liberty Oregon is the game I'm looking for. The upset pick I'm going for is Akron over Arizona, and I would pick VCU over BYU. And to win the East region, I don't think I can't pick Duke because I said I wasn't gonna pick Duke. Um, so with that being said, give me Wisconsin. Give me the Badgers.
Wisconsin. Okay. I was very upset. I thought they were going to pull it out today. I thought they were going to get my pick right for the Big Ten championship. They were so close against Michigan, but they are a very good team. They would be a tough team to beat, and that's why I think we spoke about this before we went
Yeah,
on the
they are a
air.
very tough team.
This region, the East region, is on par with where the West region is in terms of being very, very tough. Duke being your one, you have Bama and your two, and then you have Wisconsin as your three seed. That's tough
Like,
as it
listen,
is.
Wisconsin, they are battle tested. They have neutral
Right.
court wins over Michigan State. They have wins at Purdue. They absolutely dunked on Illinois at home. So this is a battle tested team. Now, have they kind of had a couple really bad losses? Like they got blown out by Marquette, right? And Marquette's a seven
Right.
seed. They lost at home by double digits to Penn State. Not great, but they're kind of starting to click late in the March, and this is when you want to start hitting those high notes. So give me Wisconsin here.
Okay. The Badgers into the Final Four for Johnson. So for me, I think my first round upset, you kind of already mentioned it. I have VCU over BYU in that matchup. It is I believe, a 3.5 point spread between those two teams, so it's a very, very close counter. I expect that to be the case between those two teams. VCU is kind of riding a nice wave of momentum after winning their conference championship. BYU hasn't really looked good these last couple weeks, so it's kind of sometimes that might be good for you going into the tournament. Sometimes that's not good for you going into the tournament. So I'm gonna take VCU to get the job done, get that first round upset. For me, the game I'm looking forward to in that first round, I would have to go. I'm gonna go with that Arizona Akron game that you mentioned because I think it has not only upset potential, but it might even be just it could be a very close game. The 14.5, I know is a very crazy high spread for Arizona. I really don't think it's going to be that big of a blowout for Arizona. They're coming off a conference championship loss to Houston. They played pretty good in that game, but didn't get the job done. Akron, as you mentioned, came back to win the MAC championship. I think Akron will keep this one very, very close. They've been, a team the last couple of years as well, Johnson, that has had some really good tournament success. So maybe that will prove very, very nicely for them come tournament time against Arizona. But that's probably the game I'm looking forward to the most in that first round, that 4-13 matchup with those two teams. The team that I'm picking to win this region, I just have to go with Duke. I don't want to. I just think Duke is at the point where they lose Cooper Flag and they still look pretty good. I know the ACC hasn't looked great this season. The only team that really scares me for Duke that I think that they probably don't get in. And it's crazy that I'm going to say it's only team because I don't even think it's Alabama, who was originally my national champion pick at the beginning of the season. I don't think Alabama gets to the Elite Eight because I like Wisconsin as well to get to the Elite Eight and face Duke. I think the problem for Alabama is their team's defense has been horrible these last couple of weeks, and you saw what happened against them against Florida in that semifinal matchup. They gave up, I think, about 57 points in the second half to the Gators in that game. And I get it. Florida's been a sensational team this season, obviously winning the SEC title. But Wisconsin, I know, had a bad game today in the Big Ten championship, but when they can shoot, they shoot the lights out of the court. So if they're hitting from three every single time, Bama's going to be in a whirlwind of trouble and having to fight back for a potential double-digit deficit. So I don't even like Bama to get past the Badgers in that spot. And then if they play Duke, that's probably the one team. If I'm Duke Blue Devil fan, I'm like, okay, we know this one's going to be tough. If we play some strong defense in this game, we should be fine and move on to the Final Four. So I'll have the Blue Devils getting there. I don't really want to do it. I would like a team like Wisconsin or Bama just to get there in general. But I will just go with Duke just because they've been still pretty dominant even without Cooper Flag these last couple games.
All right. And I guess at the halfway point here, Nick, I want to kind of talk about KenPom because even though it's not an official metric, it's always good to look at. So I think they took KenPom a lot more seriously this year. There's a couple teams that got the at-large bids that I don't think should have. Let's talk about it really quickly. Teams 1 through 44 all made the tournament in KenPom this year. The only team that didn't make it was Ohio State at 39. They didn't make it because I think they was 2 games over 500 at 17 and 15. Last year, there were a lot of just glaring absences in KenPom. St. John's at 21 being the most notable. Then you had last year Pittsburgh at 33 in KenPom not making it. Nova at 37, Indiana State at 38, Cincinnati at 39. So you had a bunch of teams miss it in that top 40 in KenPom, and I think they kind of nailed it this year in that regard.
Right. I mean, it's never tough to make that bracket. And I know. We always say at the end of the day, like, how did this team get in? How did this team get in? But I mean, it's not easy making these brackets if you think about it.
I'm just happy they used KenPom this year, but it clearly
right.
They didn't use it. It was an unofficial metric, obviously, because it wasn't on their list. They used KPI, they used BPI, they used wins above the bubble, whatever they use. But KenPom looks like it was considered this year. So,
all right. With that being said, do you want to go to the Midwest then? I guess
absolutely.
We'll run it out with obviously our region then.
Yeah, let's go to the Midwest.
I mean, why not? All right, so let's go to the Midwest. That, with being the number 1 seed being the Big 12 champion, the Houston, I can't speak right now. Houston Cougars.
There you go.
These last 24 hours have been tough. I'm shocked I even have a voice from last night, Johnson, after that game there. They'll face SIUE, who is, I believe, playing in their first ever NCAA tournament. So shout out to them for winning their conference championship.
SIU by way of Edwardsville. That is correct. Of the winners of the OVC.
They'll have a very tough matchup facing Houston, but hey, you never know. We've seen a 16 beat a 1 before. You have Gonzaga as the 8th seed taking on the number 9 seed Georgia Bulldogs. The number 5 seed Clemson Tigers taking on McNeese, who the number 12 seed. You have the number 4 seed Purdue taking on 13 seed High Point. 6th seed Illinois taking on either Texas or Xavier in that first 4 matchup as the 11th seed. The 3 seed Kentucky Wildcats will take on number 14 seed Troy. 7 seed UCLA will take on 10 seed Utah State. And the number 2 seed Tennessee Volunteers taking on 15 seed Wofford. So what do you got in this region, Johnson?
All right, we'll talk about the Midwest.
Has a lot of upset potential.
I'm going McNeese over Clemson. There's already analysts saying Clemson to the Final Four. I'm saying Clemson to the round of 64. Will Wade is a magician when it comes to coaching. I know he has his problems. I know he wasn't always the cleanest coach, quote unquote, but he has this team dancing for the second time in as many years. Winners of almost 30 games this year. There's a lot of good things about this McNeese State team. They're not really battle tested though. Again, I mentioned earlier they had early tests against Alabama and Mississippi State, which they played them both very closely, which makes me believe that they can play Alabama and Mississippi State close. Why can't they beat Clemson? So McNeese State over Clemson is my my upset. Do you have the line on that?
Let's see. I just saw it a second ago. I think it was 7.5 for Clemson.
Okay,
yeah, 7.5 Clemson.
It's not too aggressive like the other one.
There's a lot. I told you, there's a lot of upset potential. I'll mention that when I make my
the game. I guess the game I'm looking forward to most in the Midwest bracket is probably this one. I know it's a double pick, might seem lazy, but this is the one I have circled. Again, I think Gonzaga Georgia is gonna be pretty interesting. Kentucky Troy, I'm not really seeing anything. The winner of the 11th seed, so I think that's Texas Xavier. in the Midwest.
Yes,
So
yes, Texas Xavier.
maybe that might be interesting. Not really. UCLA, Utah State, not really.
I think that's a great matchup for Texas Xavier getting Illinois, who hasn't really looked good either the last couple of
Yeah,
weeks
I think that
too.
has some upset potential in there too. But again, Clemson, McNeese, that's the game to watch here. I think it's gonna be interesting. The winners of the Midwest region, give me Houston here. One of the best teams all year. Metrically, they look great. One of the top defenses in the NCAA tournament, and a top 10 offense to go with that. So they're gonna be tough to beat here. This is their region to lose here.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, Johnson. I do not having them win this Midwest region, and I'll break down that in a second. So, I mentioned this has a lot of upset potential, and I think this is where the most upsets will happen, in my opinion, come tournament time. It might not be the case, but I think if there was any potential, this would be the region to have it. You have your matchup with McNeese and Clemson. That I do like McNeese in that game. For the sake of our show, I'll pick a different upset because I do have maybe one or two more upsets in this region. Purdue at High Point is a lot closer, maybe than people think. That is a 9.5 point spread for Purdue, so that could be maybe a closer game than people expect. I don't know. I'm not willing to make that pick for High Point. I really haven't seen them as much, but Purdue hasn't looked great either the last couple of weeks, so that could be something to look out for too. I love the 11th spot for Texas and Xavier in this region. I think, in my opinion, I think whoever wins that game more than likely would probably beat Illinois, considering for Xavier Johnson, them getting Fremantle back is a huge asset for them if they're able to get past Texas and then face a team like Illinois who has the size and depth, to beat other teams in the country. But if someone like Fremantle is able to play for Xavier, that will be a nice counteract for the Musketeers in that game. Kentucky and Troy's also pretty closer than I thought expected too. I think that's a 10.5 point spread right now for Kentucky, and we've seen their recent track record facing double-digit seeds. You never know when it comes to Kentucky. They might very well lose in that first round to the Trojans. The upset I am going to take in this region is going to be Utah State over UCLA. I think the Aggies can get this one done. I don't really trust UCLA as much as I should. I know Utah State was one of those teams that maybe probably shouldn't have been in, but I just don't really. I thought whoever got the 10th seed in this region after seeing UCLA, I just immediately thought, okay, yeah, I think this is the team I'm going to make the upset pick in this region. But I will say, I think Texas and Xavier I mentioned, I think that gets an upset. I think this is an upset. I also think that McNeese gets the job done against Purdue. I'm sorry, against Clemson, and I have Gonzaga in the second round beating Houston if they get past Georgia. I think Gonzaga can maybe pull it off. I think they've got it hot at the right moment of time. Because of that happening, I have Tennessee winning this region for me. I have the Volunteers making it to the Final Four in the Midwest. The game that I'm looking forward to in the first round, I I'll go with that Illinois in the winner of the 11 game. I think just because of how close that could be, I think that's the game I'm going to look forward to the most. I do love to see. I would do really am interested to see how Clemson and McNeese does go. I think McNeese has a really good shot. I know last year we said the same thing, and they got beat down by I think Gonzaga if I'm not mistaken. Um, but I think that has the most potential for probably game of the day in that region. But I'll just stick with the Illinois and 11 seed winner for the game of the first round in the Midwest region. So there are my picks for that region. As I mentioned, Tennessee I have going into the Final Four. Then, of course, Johnson, let's go into the West region, which, in my opinion, I think is the best region right now in the entirety of this entire bracket. There's just some heavy hitters from top to bottom. You can make the case that the top four seeds in this region could make it to the Final Four, in my opinion. You have the SEC champion Florida Gators as the 1 seed, Norfolk State, the 16 seed. The 8-9 matchup, you have UConn versus number 9 seeded Oklahoma. The 5 seed Memphis Tigers will take on the 12 seed Colorado State Rams, a matchup of conference champions in that game. You have 4 seeded Maryland taking on 13 seed Grand Canyon. 6 seeded Missouri taking on 11 seed Drake. 3 seed Texas Tech taking on 14 seed UNC Wilmington. How about this matchup in the first round? 7 seed Kansas taking on 10 seed Arkansas. Bill Self versus John Calipari. And then if they're able to get past, they potentially get a matchup in the second round with Rick Pitino as the 2 seed St. John's Red Storm will take on 15 seed Omaha to round out the West region.
Yeah, it seems like the committee saw what happened with the Creighton game and the fans at MSG, and they said, you know what, let's get the entire state of Nebraska to hate St. John's. So I think next year, if the
Yeah,
St. John's makes it, Nebraska makes it, they're going to play each other. They just got to go for the
possible.
trifecta at this point. So I guess going to the West region, I guess my upset pick here is Drake over Missouri. That may be a lazy one, but Drake winners a 30 game. Missouri, again, I'm not too high on the SEC. I think it's going to be a real upset pick there. The game I'm looking forward to is, I don't want to say it. Is it, dare I say, the St. John's game?
I
I
mean,
don't want to say it to mush us. I think what's going to be interesting, though, is the 5-12 matchup here, Memphis, Colorado State. These are teams that are both on an absolute heater, and something's got to give here. So that's the game I'm going to look forward to. Memphis, Colorado State. I would say UConn, Oklahoma. That's going to be interesting as well because the winner gets to run to a buzzsaw in Florida. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. And the winner out of here, give me Texas Tech.
okay.
Give me Texas Tech. So I really think they're, uh, and this is my lock on Texas Tech. I think they win the first round matchup, obviously, and then they run the Drake, right? Drake, you had we get a Cinderella story in Drake or Texas Tech easily advances to the Sweet 16. Now, if St. John's does make the Sweet 16, they're already on a heavy win streak. That's not going to calculate in the March. Like the Johnnies maybe have one or two in them. That's my opinion. They're not going to run a 13 or 14 game winning streak to end the year. That's crazy talk. So if St. John's does beat Omaha and that does beat the winner of Kansas, Arkansas, I think that's where it ends there, and that puts Texas Tech versus whoever, and it's a win. It's a win, and you're in for the Final Four. So give me Texas Tech to win it.
Okay. So for me, I don't. This is weird because can I pick an upset if the team is a favorite in that game?
Why is it Drake the favorite over Missouri?
Colorado State is a 2.5 point favorite against Memphis right now.
I mean, you could do that, I guess.
Is that technically? I want to go the same route as you. I love that Drake upset. I think Drake gets the job done as well. I think for the same, for us, I'm just trying to do a different one just to explain how many upsets there are possible in this tournament, and also not try to mush us at the same time. Man, it's tough. I'll go with Colorado City. I guess I'll pick that as my upset. They're playing some really good basketball as of late. We obviously saw them going into this weekend. They weren't even in the tournament going into the weekend, and they are playing some unbelievable basketball. I mean, blowing out Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. They got some big time wins as well along the way against teams that were firmly into the bracket. And now they get a Memphis team that's also had a phenomenal season. Penny Hardaway's done a great job with this team. And they have potential to maybe even go to Memphis could be a team that either loses in the first round or can make it all the way to the Sweet 16 in this tournament. But that's the problem. It's like if you have one of those teams that either has first round potential or bust, or I'm sorry, Sweet 16 potential or bust, that's probably where you're going to see the upset happen most of the time of the day. And Vegas is seeing that as well. They think Colorado State is going to get the job done with the way they're playing as of late. So I'll just go with the Rams to get the job done against Memphis in the first round as my upset, even though they are the favorite in that game, which you don't see very often. The game I'm looking forward to in that first round, I'll tell you what, it's a game that I think also has upset potential. Maryland and Grand Canyon, I think that could be a really, really fun game between those two teams. Grand Canyon winning their conference championship. Maryland's had some heartbreaking losses pretty much the entirety of the season. Their last 4 games that they lost, in fact, have all come down to the final whistle. And Grand Canyon, they're a 10.5 point underdog in this game. I could very much well see them pulling this upset, and we could very well have a Colorado State Grand Canyon matchup in the second round of the NCAA tournament. I think it's very possible that could very much well happen. But that's the game I'm looking forward to the most in that West region. And for me to come out of the West region, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick St. John's. Why not? I'm going to stick with my gut. I think they can get to the Final Four. I think for
I don't
me,
think so, but I want to hear your. I want to hear. I want to hear the logic. I want to hear it.
I am concerned because they won a lot of games. We mentioned this last week. They're on a nice win streak right now. They could very well, they could easily lose in their second round matchup to a team like Kansas and Arkansas. You never know. I don't think that's the case. Hunter Dickinson maybe could be a problem for St. John's in the second round if they face them. Texas Tech also concerns me. JT Toppins had a sensational season for the Red Raiders. I think for me, I'm just going based off of how this team's defense has been playing the last couple of weeks. They've been sensational. The only issue is going to come down to if they capitalize on shots. You and I both saw it firsthand. That second half of that game against Creighton was probably the best shooting performance they've had maybe all season. If you want to really come down to it, they shot 20 of 28 in the second half of that game. If they shoot anywhere remotely close to that metric, they are a Final Four team because they play defense really tough. They're a gritty team, and they have a capability to turn the on switch off. Turn off switch on, I should say, and beat a team like Florida maybe or a team like Texas Tech and move on into the Final Four. So I have us making it to the Final Four.
All right, man. Listen, I think it's possible. I think it's unlikely though. Listen, Evan Miwa, he agrees with you. He gives us a hold on, let me tell you what he gives us. Because I had his stats up here not too long ago. Evan Miwa gives St. John's a 19% chance to get to the Final Four. So a little bit less than 1 in 5.
Yeah, I love Florida. I hate that we're in the same bracket as Florida because I really want to put Florida in my Final Four.
Florida is 40.8%, by the way, so it's not like very lock either. Again, they're the third highest, but it's not like they're lock.
I think I think it's because of being in the same region with Texas Tech and St. John's. I mean that's brutal for them. I mean that's not an easy metric for them to get into the Final Four. We talked about earlier with Auburn, having a lot of people's view maybe a clear path to the Final Four. You can make the case for Houston or Tennessee probably having a clear path to the Final Four. Duke, I mean maybe the same thing. No, I mentioned it. The top 4 seeds. You can maybe make the case in the West to making it the Final Four. I could even make the case for Maryland. They've been pretty good most of the majority of the season. The problem is they could also be a team that maybe loses in the first round to a team like Grand Canyon. So maybe if you don't want to go to the top 4 seeds, at least go to the top 3. Each one of these top 3 seeds could make a case for the Final Four, and I think it very well could just be me being a homer and picking St. John's to be in the Final Four, but I'm going to base it off of what I've seen the last couple of weeks from this team. They've been playing some great basketball. Sometimes that helps you in the tournament. Sometimes that, it's a buzz killer because you're playing too good to the point where, eventually steam's going to run out. So I don't know.
The analytics also agree with you, by the way. Analytically speaking, again, this is evanmewa.com. The top 10 teams most likely to, make it to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, title game, championship. 3 of them are coming out of the top 10 are coming out of this region. Again, in likelihood, Florida number 3, St. John's number 7, and then Texas Tech number 10. And then also, if you want to expand to the top 15, number 7 seed Kansas is number 15.
Right.
So this is the most stacked region.
That's what I'm saying. If Kansas beats St. John's in the second round, I could see them being Texas Tech if they get to Texas Tech.
Absolutely. And the analytics agree with you.
Right. That you can make a case for 4 or 5 teams in this one region alone to make the Final Four. Yeah, and Kansas could be that Cinderella. It could be that quote unquote Cinderella team.
Yeah, we didn't even mention in all of this. We didn't even mention Maryland.
Right. I think Maryland's really good. Like I said, Grand Canyon, I think, is a team that also could pull off an upset because that's one of those 4-13 games where you're like,
Maryland is actually Maryland's actually right below Texas Tech at 11, by the way. So
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Or the top 11 in this region. So it's crazy.
That's why I was saying to you pre-show. I said this is the toughest region in the entire bracket. I'm happy to be in the tournament, but man, we got a rough region to be in. Considering you got Florida playing hot as of late, Texas Tech has got to be.
This is punishment for the Big East, by the way. This is punishment because we don't play football.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, I'll just take the Giants to make it. I picked them, last week when we made our teams to make the Final Four. I'm kind of going similar to what I had originally. I think I changed it up just a little bit. 2 of the teams that I originally had, I have still making the Final Four. But the problem I had also I ran into, Johnson, is that the two teams I had to make the national championship game are in the same region. So I kind of got a bad break with that in terms. And funny enough, you also had the exact same thing happen to you as well.
Yeah, that's why.
Auburn and Michigan State.
Yeah, that's why I changed it up now.
Yeah. So before we go into who we have making it to the national championship game itself and who wins the national championship, who is your Cinderella team?
New Mexico.
This, New Mexico?
Yeah, New Mexico, because I think they beat Marquette, and I think to qualify for Cinderellas, at least get to the Sweet 16.
Did you pick them last year, too?
I did. I'm going to keep on picking them until it happens.
I gotta see what. Do you know by chance who I picked last year for that?
I do, actually. Your Cinderella last year was Mississippi State.
Oh, God. Didn't they lose in the first round?
You did call a couple upsets, though. You called GCU over St. Mary's and NC State over Texas Tech. The only upset I got last year was James Madison's victory. So,
I'm trying to look for that right now at the moment. Oh, I see it, yeah.
And we both had UConn as our national championship, right out the gate. So that we did get right.
Yeah, it was one where we didn't want it to happen. You saw it kind of writing on the wall.
Yep.
Okay. Who's my Cinderella going to be this year? I'm. Call me crazy. I'm gonna go with Gonzaga. I'll go with Gonzaga as my Cinderella.
Like, kid, that feels dirty as a Cinderella because I've made 8 straight Sweet 16s. Listen, don't get me wrong. It's an uphill battle for Zags here.
Houston is that's why I'm saying, like, they could easily lose in that second round, but
they could easily lose round one.
Round two. Yeah, they could lose in round one too.
I'll give you Gonzaga. If you want to make him a Cinderella, sure.
I mean, listen, if you want to give me a second, I have a second team, if anything.
I'll give you both. How about you pick 1 and 2, like 1A, 1B?
Okay. If I had a second Cinderella, if it's not Gonzaga, if I had to pick a second Cinderella, I was debating it because I was looking at another team while we were discussing it. I'll go with UC San Diego.
I like that.
UC San Diego.
I can easily see them getting the upset, and
because I can not only see them being Michigan, depending on who they play in the second round. If it was A&M or even Yale,
that's what I said.
I could see them winning that game as well.
Yep.
And then they run into the buzzsaw, like you mentioned in Auburn.
Yep, that's a very realistic scenario, and I do like it.
And I'll give you this: I will only, if both of them get it done, which I'm not, I'll only accept the UC San Diego if it works. Like if they get to the Sweet 16, I'll count that as my Cinderella pick.
Fair enough. So who's your national championship game participants? Excuse me.
It's not a fun one. It's just not fun.
Mine isn't either.
I'm gonna pick Auburn to beat St. John's. I got us to the Final Four.
Can you stop bushing us?
I said Auburn.
Oh, okay. Thank God.
Yeah, I didn't put us in the title game. I said I'm gonna stop us after.
Okay. I heard St. John's for a second, and I just blacked out for a second.
No. Listen, you know me. I'm gonna make a bracket with them winning the national championship. I have to.
I'm gonna make 10 brackets of them making the national championship, and none of them are gonna win.
I'm gonna go with Auburn versus Duke. It's a matchup I don't want to see. I have a bad feeling that's gonna be the title game. So that's who I have playing the national championship this year. How about you?
I have Auburn and Houston. Then I have Houston over Auburn.
You have Houston over Auburn.
Yep. The Big 12 gets another one.
I'm gonna go with Auburn to win. I remember I picked Alabama at the beginning of the season to initially win the national championship. Maybe it could still get done. I'm still worried about their defense. That's really been a problem for them all year. I think the biggest thing for Auburn that could help them is that they haven't looked good as of late. But you and I have always agreed that even if you're not looking that as you're kind of like on and off going into this tournament, that's probably the best for you because you're kind of ticked off with the way you're playing, and you're going to want to play to a full 100% level going into the tournament. And I think that can work at Auburn's advantage in their favor. Obviously Bruce Pearl has been so close these last couple of years with even Auburn and even back then with Tennessee to try to win a national championship. He wants to get it done eventually, and I think they get it done this time around. Duke is probably the sexy pick for a lot of people. I am still a bit concerned with Cooper Flagg and his health and status, even if he does play. that's not going to be an easy matchup, even if he has to play Auburn, because they have the size and depth to match up with a guy like Cooper Flag and the rest of that team. So I'll just go with Auburn to win the national championship this year.
All I'm going to say is about the SEC, I better see at least 5 teams in the Sweet 16 from the SEC because you pretty much have buys in 4 of them. If I don't see getting 14 teams in, if I don't see 5 of them at least in the Sweet 16, this conference is a joke. I will never hear about SEC supremacy ever again. This is how I'm looking at it. Auburn is a lock to go to the Sweet 16, right? So just
they have to be, yeah.
And then A&M, they have a really good shot too. A&M, I would give them like a 70% chance to get in the Sweet 16. So that's 2 already, right? And that's just, we're not even out of the South region yet. Ole Miss probably doesn't get there. I mean, they're going to run to Iowa State. Iowa State probably gets there. Right. Mississippi State over Duke, not happening. Then you take a look at Alabama. There's a potential that if you play Alabama and Vanderbilt round 2, so one automatically goes to Sweet 16 there. So that's your third team, and we're only halfway through the bracket. Then you go to the West region. Florida's a lock, right? That's 4 teams right there. And then, again, realistic that Missouri makes it too. I mean, that's a little bit more out there. That's more outlandish, but I'm not going to count that one. Kansas, Arkansas. Arkansas over Kansas, and you have to be Arkansas over St. John's. Not that realistic. You have a path, but it's not as strong. Gonzaga, Georgia, then you go into Houston, so that's like a pipe dream. And then you have Kentucky. You have Kentucky that's going to face Illinois or Texas or Xavier. So there's a realistic possibility here that you have Texas over Illinois. Texas over Xavier, then Texas over Illinois, and Kentucky over Troy. So that's your 5th team right there, right? And then you have Tennessee. So if I don't see at least 5, there's major problems here. This bracket was literally my head's gonna explode because this bracket was literally meant to get 5 teams from the SEC in the Sweet 16.
I can't wait for Kentucky to lose in the first round again, and you're going to be like, "Well, I saw this happening." You didn't even call this happening as an upset. It's more the fact that you've been, you've had your displeasures with the SEC these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, because you got your wish. You got the most tournament bids, historic season, strength of schedule, beating your chest nonsense, you're better, better than the ACC. If I swear to God, if I see 6 combined bids in the Sweet 16 from the ACC and the Big East, and I don't see that many from the SEC, just close your conference. Just shut down shop and stick to football. But if you put 5 or 6 teams in there, I'll respect it a little bit more because this is tailored to get the SEC 5 or 6 teams in the Sweet 16. And that's not me being a homer. That's not me being bitter. That's just taking a look of matchups on the bracket right now.
14 teams in.
You have to get it. And not only is the sheer amount of teams, it's just the way that you got your draws too. It's just so beneficial. So if I don't see 6 teams in 10 days from now, I'm going to lose my mind.
I think you can make the case for. I think Ole Miss also has the case to be a Sweet 16 team for me. I mentioned it earlier. I think they can get past their first round matchup, and then they can get past Iowa State in the second round. And you never know. Iowa State maybe could lose to Lipscomb. Whoever knows? But I think Ole Miss could be a team that hasn't looked great this year, but I think they could easily get into the Sweet 16. There's another team that's kind of weird for me. So, okay, I don't know. But I agree with you. I think it's been too good of a year for them to not at least have 5 teams in the Sweet 16.
At least 5. I counted 6. So you know what? If one of us get picked off early, it'd be an absolute joke. Especially if you have Texas.
I think it's possible.
You could have. It's realistic that you have 2 or 3 matchups. And you have 2 or 3 matchups in the round of 32 that are all SEC teams. So
you could have Texas, another team, making it to the Sweet 16 if they get past Xavier.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. Well, you'd have to get past Xavier and Kentucky, but that's a guarantee right there.
Look, the way Kentucky's playing right now, I'm not liking how they're playing. They've been playing brutal as well going into the tournament.
I'm guessing. Listen, we'll see how it goes, but I better see 6 or at least 5.
I better see 6, or else I'm writing to what's his name, Greg Sankey.
I don't know. The guy's an absolute clown with seeding this year, so I don't want to talk about it.
Commissioner is for the SEC. I think it is him though, but I know him. I only know him for football. I don't know if they have a different commissioner for basketball.
I don't think so. I think it's.
I don't think so either. Right? Yeah, it probably is the same. But yeah, so those are our picks for each region's upsets, as well as Cinderella pick, our region winners, and of course making it to the national championship game and the national champion itself. Johnson, any lasting remarks on what has been a truly great regular season of college basketball, and it's only going to get better now the next 3 weeks with this tournament coming up.
Yeah, I have some words of wisdom from I think it's an ancient Greek philosopher.
Oh,
Yeah, I saw it the other day, and I thought this is kind of
okay.
relevant. And I think it goes something along the lines of "This is March." I
Don't
think the
say
name.
it. God damn it.
I think the guy's name is John Rothstein or something like
God
that.
damn
But
it.
it's really words of
I should,
wisdom to
I
live
should
by.
have known. You started saying it. It didn't pop. It didn't process through my head until you started saying. He had an old saying. And I go, oh no, he's gonna say Rodstein.
This is
I should have
March.
known.
Shout out
I
John
should have
Rothstein,
known.
one of the greatest to do
You're
it right
not
now.
wrong. This is certainly March. Also, I'm watching ESPN making the picks for the tournament, and a lot of us they have a lot of I think 3 of the 4 of them picked us in the Elite Eight. So
I
just
don't. Well, that's the jinx. So St. John's getting knocked down
just
the round of 64. See you guys
just
next year.
just telling you, it's not only me. It's everyone is assuming that they get into there, but a lot of people are picking Florida to win the national championship. So just a caution for a lot of people. There are a lot of people right now on Florida because of how they've been playing the last couple weeks. So that could be a trap. And that's why I feel a little bit more better about me picking St. John's over them in that region. But no, my luck, you and I will probably be down bad at the end of the season. But nonetheless, we had a great year. It was still fun regardless. And being there
Yeah.
yesterday for the championship game was probably one of the more better sporting experiences. I'm probably speaking for yourself, but as well, but probably one of the better sporting experiences we've experienced in our entire lifetimes.
Oh,
That was an
bet.
insane thing to be at.
Absolutely. That's a 100%. That's a lock.
Yeah,
St.
very
John's
loud
plus
atmosphere
2200. By the
yesterday.
way, notable. I guess notable with us would be Michigan State
Was that
around there.
is that odds for the
Yeah,
national
yeah, plus
championship?
2200 for us. Michigan State's at plus 2200. Well, as well. Alabama at plus 1700. I'm just again going around what's by St. John's. So let's take a look here before we sign off.
I didn't even.
Texas Tech at
Yeah,
plus
I didn't
3500. I guess
yeah,
that's kind of close. Tennessee at plus 1500, kind of close as well. But not too many more teams with higher odds than us. I think we're like the 7th or 8th. So
we are
makes sense.
these. I'm looking right now. We're 7th best odds.
7th. Okay. So off the cuff.
Yeah, you never know. But like I said, I'm looking. It's funny because I'm looking at the odds too, and some of the teams that we were mentioning earlier, they're all in that same region again. I see Florida, I see St. John's, I see Texas Tech, I see Maryland. They're all in that freaking region. They are all in that freaking region. And Kansas, as you mentioned
There's
too, is
groups of
also
death and there's group of life, and that's certainly a
yeah,
group of
that's a group.
death.
As someone once said, the gates of hell. It's mentality in that region. I think that was a Rod Steve quote, but I kind of butchered it. But I'll try to make sure I get it right the next time we record one of these
I
episodes.
believe in you.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get it right the next time. But yeah, that will do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. A very special show here tonight, being the first night of us discussing March Madness in this year's NCAA tournament, and we'll be breaking down a lot of these matchups the next couple weeks. As I mentioned, 22 days from tonight, we will have a national champion in college basketball. Jonathan and I will be recapping some of the stuff that happens in the first, second, Sweet 16, Elite 8, and of course Final Four, and of course the national championship games along the way these next 3 weeks. So make sure you tune into the show to find out what happened in this year's NCAA tournament. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your March Madness, and hopefully you get yourselves a nice, perfect bracket potentially.